Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Daniel Gormally. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about an interesting subject, which is the England seniors team and a selection for that. Now, Keith Arkle is a regular on the England seniors team and he has competed for the England seniors team A in the past. However, it seems that he is now being offered a seat on the England team B. And understandably, as I've experienced myself, people get very passionate about these sort of things. When you feel like you should have been selected and you're not, it can really. I mean, I know it's just a game. It's very easy to say, well, chess is just a game. But it's something you get very passionate about because you put your life into it. Your life is revolving around chess. So I'm completely understanding from Keith's perspective in that sense. But let's read what he says. So let's have a look. So he says, usually I try to post positively, but Facebook has been very helpful when from time to time I've been wronged, which I'm grateful for. The following is gut-wrenching. Okay, it's not a matter of life and death, but it's crushing for me from a professional viewpoint. Let me explain. The focal point of my life for the last decade has been senior chess, and specifically the World Senior Team Championships, and my endeavours to help steer my team to the gold medal. I've given my best and proud of what I've achieved. Yeah, it carries on. My record in individual championships is pretty good. However, my performance in the event, which include wins over GMs Sheznikov, Bishkov and Hebden, was highest ever achieved. Higher than when Mickey Adam does read slightly narcissistic, but this is not unusual for Keith's Facebook posts. But I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, we chess players, we are a very narcissistic breed in general. We are very kind of self-obsessed. But I think that the main point of the what he posts comes around about here, which he has highlighted as well. And he says, then suddenly out of the blue, a few days ago, I was told by team manager Nigel Povard that I had not been selected to play in the World Team in Prague in February 2025. I felt crushed. What was going on? I would be one of the three strongest players in the team, a team of 5. But it turns out I've been dropped for players weaker than me and lower rated. Again, well, it's not for me to sort of, say, but it's kind of insulting to those people who have been said to openly state that, in my opinion. But, that's just my opinion. The lower rate has very little senior experience. He's referring to Peter Wells here, I believe, and has been lower rated than me for donkey's years. Now, if that was me reading that, I'd be very annoyed, actually, from Peter's point of view. But anyway, again, I can understand. Keith, I believe, is posting this in an emotional state. Because I've spoken to him. He's obviously very emotional about the whole situation, which is understandable. The stronger of the two could be used as strength for the 65-plus team. So it means Mark Hebden, I believe. Whereas I cannot until the following year. So this decision is rational on more than one level. He carries on. He mentions his own performances. He did get a silver medal. Yeah, he got a gold. He got a super gold. That was a very good performance at European Team Championship. So he's right to highlight that. One thing I would say, though he mentions he got a silver medal in the World Team, he did play on a lower board and he lost a crucial match to Iceland. So if you're playing devil's advocate. But yeah, overall it was a good performance. And yeah, he rightly highlights he won the British Seniors Championship title. Also won 2 senior events, scoring a total of 15.5. Keith is very on it. This is why he has a lot of followers. He has a lot of comments on his posts because he does talk a lot about his own career. He's very honest. He's very open. He mentions his tournaments all the time. People feel involved in what's going on in his career. He then talks about his conversation with Nigel Povard. I'm not going to go into that in detail. I mean, in my opinion, I wouldn't post up what happened in a private email. But that's just me. It's private correspondence, but one thing I would say in Nigel's defence is that Nigel, not that he needs defending, but I've always had good relationships with Nigel Povard, unlike, for example, Nigel Schultz. Not had good relations with. Nigel Povard, there's always Nigels at the top of English chess. There's also Nigel Towers, of course. Nigel Povard has been involved, I believe he's from Surrey. been involved in the Guildford team for many years and has done a lot for chess in terms of supporting professional players and so on. He's also a strong player himself. He's an IM, I believe. I mean, really, it's quite easy to work out the gist of what Keith's saying. He feels like he should be selected for the team, and he feels that there's bias against him individually. So let's just address these 2 points, because I think it's worth talking about. Actually, it's an interesting point. I did a YouTube video where I mentioned how Fernandez possibly could have been selected for one of the team events, and potentially maybe that there was a little bit of bias as well there going on by not selecting Fernandez. Potentially, I feel that a similar situation has arisen here. I feel it's not to do with what they believe Keith's strength to be. I believe they think he's strong enough to play in the team. He has played in the team before, but it's more to do with potentially maybe the dynamics going on within the team. Maybe certain players within the team have not been happy with Keith's attitude or his performance. I don't know. That's just speculation on my part. I believe that potentially maybe insiders in the team have maybe asked for him, that they're not convinced about him going forward. That's my gut feeling. However, as far as the selection is considered, let's compare, for example, the England Open team. Now, the England Open team this year consisted of the top 5, right? So you had David Howe. It's called the Open team. So there's a women's team and there's an Open team. It's not called the men's team because that would be deemed sexist. So you can have a women's team, but you can't have a men's team. So the England Olympiad team is really essentially, other than Vita Yugov, who came in recently, has been the same team for the last probably 15 years, right? You got David Howe, Michael Adams, Gawain Jones, Luke McShane, and obviously Vita Yugov has come in to potentially bolster the team and make everyone over 2,600. Now, Luke McShane is in slight danger of dropping below 2,600 if he continues with the poor form, but he'd still have a big drop. Nigel Short doesn't really play anymore. John Nunn effectively would rule himself out of contention. Nicholas Pert is inactive. Jonathan Parker is more or less inactive. So all those people are probably not going to be considered for selection. But if you were considering other players, you'd probably be dropping down to Shreyas Royal and Daniel Fernandez. So that's a big drop from a 2609 player. Now let's consider the senior team. Now, again, John Nunn in theory could play in the over 50s because he is a senior player. But he prefers to play in the over 65s. And so, in fact, I think William Watson may be also eligible, but he's not interested. As far as I'm aware, there's also people like John Spielman, who has never shown any interest in playing seniors chess. I understand that. I do think seniors chess, in a way, it's slightly contrived. It also removes the erotic element from chess, that you're not playing out people that are younger than you. I'm only kidding, but you know what I mean? It's kind of a contrived chess, right? And you then drop to Mestel, potentially could also play. There's also people like Julian Hodgson, who's inactive, hasn't played chess for years. But Jonathan Mestel could also play, but he also prefers playing the over 65. With all due respect to John Nunn and Jonathan Mestel, if they played a lot more now, if they played in open tournaments where they'd be exposed to playing sort of like 9-10-year-olds, which you seem to get every round now. This is the attraction of playing seniors chess, because you're basically playing people either the same age as you or older. They would drop a lot of points. I think John Nunn would probably drop below 2,500 if he played a lot. Now, he would also get a bump from playing a lot, so he'd probably play better than, say, if he's coming in cold. So that you could also take that into account. I think he'd struggle to keep above 2,500, if I'm being completely honest. And so I think Mestel would probably struggle to be above 2,400. Anyway, leaving those guys aside, they're not interested in playing in the over 50 team anyway. Well, that's already been established. So the players who are John Ems, his captain. He's 24-13. Arguably, if John was a lot more active, he potentially could drop below 2,400. That's another consideration. But he historically he's always been a very strong player. He's very well prepared. He's a good player to have on the team because he's good with preparation. He's also a very positive person to be around. So there's lots of upsides there to have John Ems in your team. You then drop down a little bit. See, also I should have mentioned Stuart Conquest, who would be the number 2 player. Stuart, where's Stuart? Stuart is 2,500, right? Now again, I think if Stuart played a lot, no disrespect to him, but he's a bit older now. I think he'd probably drop below 2,500. He just doesn't play much. But he's obviously been a very strong player in the past. He's been over 2,600. He's a class act. You've got Mickey Adams at number 1, who is by far the best senior player we have. You know, he's an 8-time British champion, so phenomenal player. He's the one player you could say, possibly Stuart as well, that is 100% certain to get in the team. So then you get down to people who, yeah, so I mentioned John Ems would probably be a shoe-in for the selection. And then you go to, based on the fact that he is obviously a good captain, he is also a player. So there's a lot of positives to having John Ems. And you go down to Keith, who's also, you know, as we've mentioned before, is a very strong player. Very competitive individual, as is Mark, who's a very similar rating. So there's Keith is 2373, Mark Hebden is 2372. Very little between them. And then you go down to Peter Wells on 2351. Now, my argument would be, with the Open, you couldn't necessarily drop, you know, if you played devil's advocate, you couldn't necessarily drop Luke McShane. It'd be very hard to drop Luke McShane and say, you know, justify it and then put in a 25-20, you know, currently. However, with the seniors, if they've had a bad performance, it's understandable. You could say that they're looking at it and they're saying, look, how can we improve our performance? Let's just change it up a bit. Sometimes you just want to change the team around, maybe introduce a fresh element to it. That's not to say that Keith wouldn't get in the team in the future. I also think that there's a slight danger that because he's preempting the selection, I mean, they haven't announced who's been selected yet, that's going to annoy the selectors and potentially risk not being selected for anything in the future, not even being selected for the B team. So in my opinion, I'm not sure it's a good idea by Keith to post that at all. But he has posted it, you know, it's understandable, it's a free world, you know, you're allowed to say what you like. But there is a danger that he could potentially be shooting himself in the foot with this post, I would say. Maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot with this video. That's another potential fly in the ointment. Also dropped down, yes, I mentioned Wells. There's also Nigel Davis, who's played before as well. He's 2307. So it's true that Keith is on ratings. I believe he's the 4th best player on the team. So he's understandably annoyed that he's not been selected. However, what I would say, playing from a devil's advocate point of view, he's not 100% certain to get the team. You know, there's enough objective element there to say, well, you could put those guys in instead. I mean, Peter Wells, yes, maybe he hasn't played much seniors chess, but he also won the English Seniors Championships earlier this year. Mark Hebden won the English Championship full stop, I think, a couple of years ago. So, yeah, they've both got strong arguments as well for getting in the team. And the other thing Keith mentions is ECF rating is higher. Another argument to make. So, my ECF rating is 2469. Keith's is just behind me. But apparently he's running live rating because he played a few games in the Manchester League. 2480, which would get him all the way up to just below Harry Grieve. 2480 odd. So that's significantly above John Ems, Peter Wells, Mark Hebden. However, I don't believe that ECF ratings are really taken into account when they consider a selection. I believe they more go off FIDE, in my opinion. So these are really the issues. I mean, the other issue that Keith mentioned was bias, and this is, yeah, as I mentioned before, I think if there's bias, it's potentially maybe coming from internally within the team, that maybe other players have maybe taken exception to Keith in certain matches. It might just be little things where maybe somebody... There are more powerful elements than Keith in the team, so they may have taken exception to him, maybe taking a draw at the wrong moment or losing that game in that crucial match, and said, look, we don't want him in the team now. We want that player. We want to try that player. Now he may come back into the team in future. I don't really think that Povar would be biased, but obviously I don't know him that well. I don't know him socially that well. Is potentially, as I mentioned before with Daniel Fernandez, I do think there was some bias there. So it could well be that in this case there's also some bias and they're just denying it. Hard to say. It's a very hard thing to say because there's no evidence. You're basically just going on your gut feeling. There's no... Keith would have no evidence of bias. He'd have no record of conversations people have had about him. And clearly he's then going to take it personally because it feels like a personal assault on him. It feels like people are rejecting him. And the other thing I would say with Keith, I think one of the reasons he had a successful senior career is because he didn't have a great... I mean, he could have probably achieved more in his earlier part of his career. I think he had the talent to do that, and he feels like he's kind of making up for that in a way. And I feel like he should have probably been selected for some of the Olympiad teams in the past. I do think that's true. You know, there were teams going back in the past who's kind of ignored, and I think there was like the southern-based grandmasters were potentially ahead of him. And there is I think there is a kind of a bias in this country. There's more powerful elements than me, more powerful elements than Keith, and there's a kind of an old boys network to some degree within English chess. Don't get me wrong, I think there is an objective working out of who is going to play and who isn't going to play, but that is just my personal gut feeling that there is some kind of bias involved. Now, the one thing I would say is to remove this kind of arguments in the future, there should be clear qualifying criteria for players playing in the Olympiad team. Now, if you had clear criteria and you fulfilled that criteria, then you're gonna get picked, and there's no way that people can unpick you. Pretty much. I mean, let's take, for example, in athletics, you have clear qualifying criteria. If you post a quick enough time, you're going to get selected for the Olympiad. For the Olympics, sorry, not the Olympiad, obviously. Golf, for the Ryder Cup, for example, I think there's a certain number of players who qualify automatically. And there's also wildcard picks. So maybe someone like a Wells or you know, somebody like that could potentially be a wildcard pick. For the England men's team, you could have Shreyas as a wildcard pick or something like that. So that is something. I mean, the one thing I would say with England football team is that is kind of similar situation because the England football team, for example, is based on objective opinion. You know, the manager picks the players. There's no actual ratings because it's a team sport. There aren't individual ratings. So Harry Kane may be openly perceived, or Jude Bellingham, as two of the strongest players. They'd probably be 2,800 plus if they were chess players, right? Relatively speaking. And maybe someone like Jack Grealish would be 2,680. But this is just an objective opinion. So therefore, the manager can pretty much select who they want. And obviously this led to disputes in the past as well with Paul Gascoigne trashing his hotel room because he wasn't selected for the England World Cup. So maybe Keith would trash his hotel room in Guernsey. He's currently playing the Guernsey Congress. Anyway, that is my opinion. I do think there should be strict qualifying criteria. And you could also do that for the seniors team as well. Because if you did that for the seniors team, you said, look, if you play these tournaments, if you play British Championships, if you play the seniors championships and you get a high enough placing, you're going to get selected for the seniors. We're going to have a certain number of places. Obviously, you want Adams in the team. If he says, I don't want to play in the seniors championships, you've got to have Adams in the team. So he could maybe qualify on rating, and then you'd have certain spots available for those people who'd scored enough points in tournaments. So that would incentivise people to play in those sort of tournaments. So I think if they tighten up the selection criteria, because clearly with chess, you do have a way of measuring individuals in the same way you don't have in team events. Therefore, why not use selection criteria? Use it for the open section as well, because if you had it for the open section, then it would incentivise a lot of these grandmasters to play in tournaments like the British Championships. At the moment, they just know they're going to play in a team. I mean, if we're going back to the open, one good thing I would say, obviously we've got very strong players at the top. Don't get me wrong, they're incredibly strong. But the problem is we're a little bit stale at the top because we basically had the same players for 15 years. Now, the good news is we've got people like Shreyas coming through. They're not guaranteed to get there. It's still a big gap. We've got people like Shreyas coming through. Further down, we've got people like Bodhana, Ethan Pang, Supratit Banerjee, Stanley Badasconi, Jude Shearsby, people like that. You know, also people like Ami Gartz, who's just become a Grandmaster. You know, Jonah Willow. They can hope to improve. Daniel Fernandez, I mentioned earlier. Some of these other people above them might decide. Nick Pert might decide, look, I just want to have a proper go at being a proper chess player and screw that other kind of life I was living. You know, so this is the reality of the situation. But I do think that would incentivise people to play in these tournaments. But yeah, I think Keith has a genuine beef, and it actually reminds me of a situation that I had when I was playing for the England team back in 2005, 2006. So if you look at someone like Michael Adams, because he's been so strong over the years, he effectively can pretty much say, well, I'm going to guarantee my place. He's certainly guaranteed his place in the seniors team. It's getting to the point now where it's less certain that he'll get selected for the Open team, but he can pretty much guarantee his place. However, for a lot of the players, they're kind of on the fringes. So it's not certain whether we get selected or not. I was kind of in that category. Now, around about 2006, although I had a kind of disaster in that tournament, which was, you know, at least partly self-inflicted, if not all self-inflicted, I was actually probably in a position where I was pretty much certain to get in the team at that point before what happened. Obviously, after that, I was actually even banned from being selected. But I believe that Danny King and Murray Chandler kind of posted about how they were complaining about the fact that Nick Pert and Stuart Conquest were selected to play for the England team when they felt that their results were better and they felt that they should get in the team. So I remember, I kind of fell out with Danny King over that in a way, because I remember I was walking past him. This was near Sunningdale in Ascot. I was walking along with Dave Ledgers before a 4CL game on a Saturday, and Danny King said hello to me. I blanked him because of this, because I was annoyed at the fact that I just felt that it's not really what you should say, because those players have been selected, and I felt like, you're kind of undermining them by saying that. So I kind of blanked him, and then he's never spoken to me since. So it's kind of like that, and people get this impression that in chess everybody's friends with each other, everyone's like really good friends, but in reality there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of jealousy involved, there's a lot of trying to promote your career to the best. So I fully understand Keith's post. I mean, it's coming from a point of view that he's very upset about the whole situation. But as I said before, I think when he's calmed down, he will probably realise that, it's going to work out for him in the long run. He just take that board one in the 50B team, and just say that, okay, I'll take that. If you're kind of throwing your toys out the pram like his post looks like a little bit, they're going to turn against you, and that's going to make things worse in the long run. So if you just basically say, look, okay, I'll take that place, I'll take my onions for now, and then hopefully come back strong in the future, I think that would work out better from the long run. But I'm obviously at the moment is in a very emotional state. It reminds me a little bit like that scene in The Sopranos. I don't know if anyone remembers that TV show, when towards the end, and Tony Soprano goes to kind of try and make peace with Phil Leotardo, and he's there with is it Carmine or no, somebody else like his son, and they basically go to Phil's house. And Phil rejects, and he says, wiser heads have prevailed, but he's kind of furious. So I feel like it's kind of a little bit like that. So please leave your comments down below. It's a very interesting, evolving. I might have to delete this video myself because I can imagine there'll be complaints from the selectors to even to highlight this. But please leave your comments down below. I think it's an interesting situation. What do you think about the England selection team? Do you think there's bias that goes on? Do you think that maybe it's an emotional reaction by Keith? What do you think?